It was the second Sunday of May, Mother's Day. I still remember how the sunlight poured through my window. Warm and soft when my son walked in holding a bouquet of fresh lily. "Happy Mother's Day, Mom," he said with that calm, businesslike smile of his. Ethan had always been polite, maybe a little too polite for a son. He placed the flowers on the table, adjusted his expensive watch, and said, "Mom, Mia still sends you $4,000 every month, right? Just checking you're comfortable." My heart dropped. $4,000? For months, I'd been living on canned food from the community pantry and little donations from kind neighbors. I blinked hard, forcing my voice not to shake. "Son, the church has been helping me manage." His smile faltered. The brightness in his eyes dimmed, replaced by confusion. Before he could speak, Mia entered, radiant as ever in a cream silk dress and heels that clicked like confidence itself. The air filled with her expensive perfume, sharp enough to cover the faint smell of the bread I had just baked. "Oh, Mother, you must have forgotten," she said sweetly, brushing invisible dust off her dress. "I come every month to drop off the money. You know how forgetful things get at your age." Her tone was soft, but her words stung like salt in a wound. Forgetful. Old. People had called me many things since my husband died 8 years ago. Lonely, fragile, elderly. But forgetful wasn't one of them. I remembered every letter, every grocery list, every neighbor who'd stopped by my porch, and I certainly remembered that. Mia had never brought me a single dollar. I looked at her and smiled faintly. The kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. "If you did bring it, dear, it must have gotten lost on the way." Silence filled the room. Heavy, awkward. Ethan looked from me to his wife, his brow furrowed. "Mia, you have been bringing the money, right? I transfer it to your account every month." "Of course I have," she replied quickly, her voice sugar-sweet. Maybe the bank made a mistake. Or maybe Mom misplaced it. The word misplaced echoed in my head. My hands clenched around my apron. I stayed quiet, not because I believed her, but because some truths reveal themselves better in silence. Ethan sighed, placing a hand on my shoulder. "I'll check the accounts, Mom. I just want you to live comfortably." I nodded and poured him a glass of juice, my heart sinking beneath the calm surface of my face. As they sat together, I saw Mia rest a hand on his arm possessively, her smile returning like a mask. The air felt colder. When they left, I stood in the doorway watching their car disappear down the road, its silver frame glinting under the sun. $4,000 a month. 8 months. $32,000. Money I had never seen. That night I wrote one short line in my old notebook. "If the truth doesn't knock, I'll go find it myself." And as I set down the pen, a strange calm filled me, the calm of a storm that hasn't begun yet. The next morning, I walked into the local bank to ask a question that would change everything. "Has any money ever been transferred to my account?" The morning after that uneasy Mother's Day, the house felt colder than usual. The lily Ethan had brought still stood on the table. Bright but lifeless, like a reminder of a lie wrapped in ribbon. I brewed my tea. But even its warmth couldn't quiet the thought hammering in my head. If Ethan has been sending money every month, where did it go? By 10 a.m., I'd made up my mind. I slipped into my old brown coat, picked up my worn leather purse, and walked the 3 blocks to Pinewood Community Bank. The wind tugged at my scarf as if trying to stop me. But I was done being still. Inside, a young teller named Lucy smiled politely. "Good morning, Mrs. Turner. How can I help you today?" "I just need you to check if there have been any transfers to my account from Ethan Turner," I said, trying to sound casual. She typed quickly, eyes moving across the screen. Then her brows lifted slightly. "From Mr. Ethan Turner?" "Yes," I replied softly. "He says he's been sending me $4,000 every month." Her fingers paused. Then she looked up, hesitant, almost pitying. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but there's no record of any such transfers. Not in the last 8 months." The only activity is a $1.42 interest payment in February. Her voice was gentle, but the words hit like cold rain. I thanked her quietly and left, my heart pounding as I stepped into the bright sunlight. The street buzzed with life. Cars passing, people chatting. Yet I felt utterly alone, standing in a truth no one else could see, that Ethan had been sending money. The bank confirmed he wasn't lying. So someone else was taking it. Someone who had access and a reason to keep me quiet. Back home, I sat by the window and pulled out an old notebook, my faith book. The one where I used to jot down grocery lists, prayers, and memories of my late husband, Henry. But this time, I didn't write prayers. I wrote facts. May 12th. Ethan says Mia has been bringing money. The church is still helping. No envelopes, no visits from the bank, no letters. May 13th, checked account. No transfers. Confirmed. The pen moved steadily, each stroke sharper than the last. It felt like I was building a case, not out of anger, but survival. Later that day, I called the bank again, pretending to ask about potential system errors. A kind older clerk hinted quietly, "If funds were transferred under your name, but not into your account, ma'am, it's possible another account was created using your identity." Another account, under my name. My fingers went cold. As evening fell, I sat on the porch, staring at the fading sky. The cicadas hummed. The tea beside me grew cold. And a quiet realization bloomed inside me. Mia wasn't just lying. She was stealing. That night, I wrote one more line in my notebook, pressing the pen hard enough to tear the paper. If she forged my name once, she'd do it again. But next time, I'll be ready. The next day, a phone call from Ethan's company would bring an unexpected ally, someone who knew exactly where every missing dollar had gone. The next morning, I was trimming the lavender bushes in my small yard when I heard a car pull up. Not the usual quiet hum of a neighbor's vehicle. This was smoother, heavier. A dark blue sedan stopped at the gate. A tall man stepped out, his suit slightly wrinkled, a leather folder tucked under his arm. "Mrs. Turner?" he called, polite but firm. I straightened, brushing soil from my hands. "Yes?" He walked closer, offering a small nod. "My name's Mr. Bennett. I work at Turner & Co., your son's firm. I'm the senior accountant there." I froze, unsure what to say. He must have seen the confusion in my eyes because his tone softened. "I'm here because of your call to the bank yesterday. One of our junior staff mentioned it, and I thought you deserved to know what's happening." Inside the house, I poured him a glass of water. The morning sunlight cut through the curtains, lighting the fine lines on his face. The face of a man who had seen too many secrets, written in numbers. He opened the folder and slid a few pages toward me. "These," he said, "are copies of transfers from your son's personal account. 8 in total, $4,000 each. They were all made to an account under the name Elaine Turner." For a second, I couldn't breathe. "Elaine Turner?" "Yes," he nodded. "Same name as yours. But the account isn't registered to your address, phone number, or ID. It was opened using a forged identification file and authorized by Mrs. Mia Turner." My hands trembled as I picked up the papers. Each line was painfully clear. Sender, Ethan Turner. Recipient, Elaine Turner. Amount, $4,000. Status, completed. Every month. 8 times. "She used my name," I whispered, staring at the lines that spelled out betrayal. Bennett's eyes softened. "I've seen this sort of thing before, Mrs. Turner. Sometimes family members use trust like a weapon. They think the old won't notice. But the truth always leaves a paper trail." I nodded slowly, my throat tight. "Does Ethan know?" He hesitated, then said quietly, "I don't believe so. He trusts his wife completely. She handles all his personal transfers." I looked down at the papers again, the numbers blurring through my tears. "She even used a copy of my ID," I said faintly. "How could she?" Bennett sighed, closing the folder gently. "I'll prepare an official report, but I need your permission to proceed. Once we alert the bank, she won't be able to access the account anymore." For the first time in months, I felt a spark of control returning. Yes, I said firmly. Do it. He gave a faint smile, not of pity but of respect. Good. And Mrs. Turner? He paused at the door. Keep a record of everything she says or does from now on. Lies have patterns. Once you see the rhythm, you'll know exactly when to strike. After he left, I stood by the window, watching the sedan disappear down the road. The folder lay open on the table, each page glinting under the light like quiet proof. That evening, I took out my brown notebook again and wrote carefully. Letter by letter, Bennett confirmed the transfers. Account forged under my name. Mia's handprints are everywhere. Justice starts today. I pressed the pen into the page until the tip almost tore through. The tea beside me had gone cold again, but I didn't care. Because for the first time, I wasn't just an old widow being pitied. I was a mother, and a woman with a plan.
3 nights later, I would invite Ethan and Mia for dinner, not for celebration, but for confrontation.
And at that table, a single careless sentence would begin to unravel everything. The next morning, I was trimming the lavender bushes in my small yard when I heard a car pull up. Not the usual quiet hum of a neighbor's vehicle. This was smoother, heavier. A dark blue sedan stopped at the gate. A tall man stepped out, his suit slightly wrinkled, a leather folder tucked under his arm. Mrs. Turner? He called, polite but firm. I straightened, brushing soil from my hands. Yes? He walked closer, offering a small nod. My name's Mr. Bennett. I work at Turner & Co., your son's firm. I'm the senior accountant there. I froze, unsure what to say. He must have seen the confusion in my eyes because his tone softened. I'm here because of your call to the bank yesterday. One of our junior staff mentioned it, and I thought you deserved to know what's happening. Inside the house, I poured him a glass of water. The morning sunlight cut through the curtains, lighting the fine lines on his face. The face of a man who had seen too many secrets. Written in numbers. He opened the folder and slid a few pages toward me. These, he said, are copies of transfers from your son's personal account. 8 in total, $4,000 each. They were all made to an account under the name Elaine Turner. For a second, I couldn't breathe. Elaine Turner? Yes, he nodded. Same name as yours. But the account isn't registered to your address, phone number, or ID. It was opened using a forged identification file and authorized by Mrs. Mia Turner. My hands trembled as I picked up the papers. Each line was painfully clear. Sender, Ethan Turner. Recipient, Elaine Turner. Amount, $4,000. Status, completed. Every month. 8 times. She used my name, I whispered, staring at the lines that spelled out betrayal. Bennett's eyes softened.
I've seen this sort of thing before, Mrs. Turner. Sometimes family members use trust like a weapon.
They think the old won't notice. But the truth always leaves a paper trail. I nodded slowly, my throat tight. Does Ethan know? He hesitated, then said quietly, I don't believe so. He trusts his wife completely. She handles all his personal transfers. I looked down at the papers again, the numbers blurring through my tears. She even used a copy of my ID, I said faintly. How could she? Bennett sighed, closing the folder gently. I'll prepare an official report, but I need your permission to proceed. Once we alert the bank, she won't be able to access the account anymore. For the first time in months, I felt a spark of control returning. Yes, I said firmly. Do it. He gave a faint smile, not of pity but of respect. Good. And Mrs. Turner? He paused at the door. Keep a record of everything she says or does from now on. Lies have patterns. Once you see the rhythm, you'll know exactly when to strike. After he left, I stood by the window, watching the sedan disappear down the road. The folder lay open on the table, each page glinting under the light like quiet proof. That evening, I took out my brown notebook again and wrote carefully. Letter by letter, Bennett confirmed the transfers. Account forged under my name. Mia's handprints are everywhere. Justice starts today. I pressed the pen into the page until the tip almost tore through. The tea beside me had gone cold again, but I didn't care. Because for the first time, I wasn't just an old widow being pitied. I was a mother, and a woman with a plan.
3 nights later, I would invite Ethan and Mia for dinner, not for celebration, but for confrontation.
And at that table, a single careless sentence would begin to unravel everything. 3 days later, I called Ethan. "Son," I said, my voice light, "why don't you and Mia come for dinner this Sunday? It's been too long since we shared a meal." He sounded delighted. "That's a great idea, Mom. Mia will be thrilled." I smiled faintly, though there was no warmth in it. Thrilled, yes. If only she knew what was waiting. For the next few days, I busied myself preparing the house. Not to impress, but to set the stage. The dining table gleamed, the silverware polished, candles placed just right. To anyone else, it looked like a warm family gathering. To me, it was the beginning of truth. Sunday arrived with a golden sunset. The smell of rosemary chicken filled the air, mingling with cinnamon from the apple pie cooling on the counter. At 6 sharp, I heard a car outside. The familiar purr of Ethan's silver SUV. They entered together, hand in hand. Ethan looked tired but cheerful. Mia, on the other hand, walked in as if she were arriving at a photo shoot, a sleek navy dress, pearl earrings, and that faint trail of perfume that always made the room feel colder. "Mom," Ethan smiled, placing a bouquet on the table. "You look wonderful." I took the flowers and smiled softly. "Thank you, dear. Dinner's ready." As we sat down, I noticed how easily Mia took control of the conversation. Stories about vacations, business events, charity dinners. Her words flowed like honey, but I could taste the bitterness beneath. Halfway through the meal, I set down my fork and said casually, "Mia, I wanted to thank you for bringing the money every month. It's been such a help." Her fork paused mid-air. Then, almost instantly, she smiled, eyes glinting. "Oh, please, don't mention it. It's the least I can do." Ethan nodded proudly. "See, Mom? I told you Mia takes care of everything." I smiled. "Yes, I was just wondering, what day do you usually send it?" Mia answered too quickly. "The 10th of every month." "The 10th? Ethan frowned. "No, honey. I scheduled it for the 15th, that's when payroll hits." The room went silent. I could almost hear the sound of her pulse against the silence, that faint panic hiding behind her still smile. She laughed softly. "Oh, right. I must have mixed up the dates." I leaned back, nodding slowly. "Of course, easy mistake." But Ethan's expression had already shifted, confusion creeping into his eyes. Mia noticed, and her laugh grew tighter. "Anyway," she said quickly, "how's the church, Mother?" I let her change the subject, pretending not to notice the nervous tremor in her hand as she reached for her glass. When dessert came, she barely touched it. I watched her face carefully, memorizing every flicker of unease. After dinner, as they prepared to leave, I walked them to the door and smiled. "Thank you for coming, both of you. Oh, and don't worry. I'll visit the bank on the 15th, just to make sure the system isn't confused." Mia's smile tightened like a thread about to snap. "Of course, Mother, you'll see everything's perfectly fine." I nodded. "Yes, I will." The car disappeared down the road, its red taillights fading into the dark. Inside the quiet house, I whispered to the empty room, "Your story has holes now, Mia. And I intend to widen every one." 2 days later, a thick brown envelope arrived at my door. Inside it were documents that would turn suspicion into proof, and silence into justice. 2 mornings after that tense dinner, the postman knocked on my door. He handed me a thick brown envelope stamped confidential. Turner and Co. For a moment, I just stared at it. My hands felt heavier than they should have, as though the weight of 8 months' lies rested inside. I set the kettle on the stove and waited for the whistle, letting the tension stretch. Then I sat by the window, slit the envelope open, and slid out a pile of neatly clipped papers. Each page was crisp, the ink bold and merciless dot sender. Ethan Turner. Recipient, Elaine Turner. Amount, $4,000. Frequency, monthly 8 consecutive transfers. I flipped through them slowly.
Every page felt like a betrayal written in numbers. There was no mistake. My name, my son's money. Her hands dot at the bottom of the first sheet. A blue ink note caught my eye. Prepared by Harold Bennett, Senior Accountant. Remarks. All funds confirmed received under secondary account managed by Mia Turner.
I pressed a hand to my mouth. The truth was there, plain as day.
But seeing it hurt more than I'd imagined. Mia hadn't just lied. She had forged my name, stolen from her husband,
and used the money meant to ease an old woman's life to buy perfume, jewelry, and comfort for herself. I could see it now. Every expensive dress,
every designer handbag, every smug smile at family dinners.
It was all bought with my son's kindness. The phone rang, breaking the silence. It was Mr. Bennett, Mrs. Turner, he said calmly. I wanted to confirm that you've received the documents. I have, I replied, my voice shaking slightly. Good, I've cross-checked every transaction.
There's also evidence of personal spending on the company credit card.
I'll prepare a report for your attorney, but I wanted you to see it first.
Thank you,
I whispered. Dottie hesitated for a second, then added softly,
You're not alone in this.
People like her rely on silence. You've already taken the hardest step, speaking up. After we hung up, I stared out the window for a long time. The sky was gray, the wind soft, the garden still. For months I'd prayed for help, not realizing it would come in the form of an accountant with tired eyes and a sense of justice.
I gathered the papers neatly,
placed them in a folder, and locked it in the drawer beside my husband's photo.
Then I took out my notebook, my witness, my shield, and began to write again. May 18th, received proof.
8 transfers, all under my name. Mia's forgeries confirmed. Bennett to file report. May 18th, plan forming.
Will act when Ethan is present. Must let her speak first. Truth tastes better when confessed. As I set down the pen,
I looked at Henry's photo on the mantel. His kind eyes, forever frozen in warmth. You'd tell me to fight, I murmured. Not for money but for dignity. Outside, thunder rolled in the distance. I walked to the porch, feeling the breeze whip through my hair.
Soon, I promised silently, very soon she'll see what happens when a quiet woman decides she's had enough. That evening, I picked up the phone and made 2 calls, one to Bennett, and the other to an old friend who happened to be a lawyer.
The plan was no longer a thought. It had begun. That evening, as the rain began to tap against my windows, I picked up the phone and made 2 calls. The first was to Bennett.
The second was to an old friend I hadn't spoken to in years, Amelia Rhodes,
now one of the most respected attorneys in our county.
Her voice was exactly as I remembered, sharp, confident, and warm beneath the steel.
Margaret Turner, she said with a smile in her tone. I was wondering when you'd finally need my help. You always were too patient for your own good.
I think I've been patient long enough, I said. I have proof, transfers, forged documents, everything. I just need someone to make sure it all comes to light the right way.
Then send me what you have, she replied. And Margaret, don't confront her yet. Let her talk herself into a corner.
Her words rang in my ears long after I hung up. By the next morning, Bennett had already emailed Amelia copies of the records.
She called me again later that afternoon.
I've reviewed everything, she said.
This isn't just deception. It's elder financial exploitation. If we push this through court, she could lose everything, including access to your son's accounts.
I stayed silent for a moment, then said quietly, I don't want her ruined, Amelia.
I just want the truth shown in front of my son.
Amelia exhaled. Then we'll do it your way.
And just like that, the quiet war began. Over the next few days, I went about my life as usual, attending church,
watering the garden, baking for the neighbors. But every movement carried a new purpose. I was preparing a storm while pretending to live in calm. At night,
I'd sit at the table with my notebook open and Bennett's papers spread out before me. Each document was a piece of my stolen peace. Each signature a small betrayal. I started planning a dinner, one last gathering where the masks would fall.
But unlike before, I wouldn't just wait for her lies.
I would create the perfect stage for them. I called Reverend Cole from the church. "Father," I said, "I'd like to host a small charity dinner next weekend."
Just a few friends and my son and daughter-in-law.
He sounded delighted. "Of course, Mrs. Turner. I'll prepare a few donation forms for you to display." "Thank you," I said softly. "That's exactly what I need."
After the call, I smiled to myself. The idea wasn't charity. It was exposure. Those donation forms would mask the real contents of the beige envelope that would sit in the center of the table. Proof, receipts, bank statements.
Every lie in ink. That night, I wrote in my journal again.
The ink deep and deliberate. May 21st. Spoke with Amelia and Bennett. Everything ready. Plan disguised as a charity dinner.
Mia will face the truth where she least expects it. At my table. I closed the notebook and looked around my small, quiet house. For months, it had felt like a prison of silence.
Now it felt like command central.
As I turned off the lamp, the reflection in the window caught my eye. An old woman, yes, but with a new fire in her gaze. I smiled faintly. "You should have never underestimated me, Mia." The following Sunday, as the golden evening light filled my home, I heard the familiar sound of Ethan's car in the driveway.
It was time for the dinner, and for the truth to take its seat at the table. Asterisk.
The following Sunday arrived dressed in gold, a calm, deceptive evening. The sky glowed with a soft orange hue, the same kind that always made my late husband say, "Even endings can look beautiful." Inside, everything was ready. A white linen tablecloth, 3 wine glasses, a modest bouquet of garden roses. And in the center of the table sat a plain beige envelope, labeled Community Donation Records. Only I knew that inside were no donation papers, only the story of a woman's greed told through receipts and forged signatures. At exactly 7, I heard the car pull into the driveway. Ethan stepped out first, smiling wide, holding a small bouquet. Mia followed, her heels tapping sharply on the pavement. She looked immaculate, pale pink silk, pearls around her neck, her perfume lingering like false kindness. "Mom, this smells incredible," Ethan said as he hugged me.
"I've missed your cooking." I smiled, resting a hand on his cheek.
"It's your favorite, beef stew and apple pie. Just like when you were little."
"Oh, how lovely!"
Mia exclaimed, her tone polished to perfection. "You always make dinners feel so special, Mother."
"Yes," I said softly. "Tonight will be very special indeed."
We sat. For a while, everything flowed normally. Small talk about the weather, the company, the neighbors.
But beneath the gentle chatter, tension brewed like an invisible current.
When the main course was done, I reached for the beige envelope and placed it near Ethan's plate. "Before dessert," I began calmly, "I'd like to show you something. These are the donation papers from my little charity project." Ethan looked curious. "Charity? That's wonderful, Mom." Mia's smile flickered, her eyes narrowing for just a second before she spoke. "Oh, I didn't realize you were organizing donations." "I like to keep things simple," I replied evenly. "Transparency is important, don't you think?" She gave a small, nervous laugh. "Of course." I slid the first page toward Ethan. His eyes scanned the paper, his expression shifting from confusion to disbelief. The words on the header were clear. Recipient, Elaine Turner. Account no ending 2094 Mom. He began slowly. "These look like my transfers." I nodded. "They are, son. The same ones you've been sending every month." Mia froze. Her fork slipped from her hand, clattering against the plate. "That's impossible," she blurted out. "There must be a mix-up." I looked at her calmly. "Then perhaps you can explain why the bank records show your signature authorizing the account." Ethan turned to her, confusion hardening into suspicion. "Mia, what's going on?" She forced a shaky laugh. It's probably a clerical error. Maybe the bank used my information by mistake." Before she could finish, a voice came from the hallway. "Actually, Mrs. Turner, the bank made no mistake." We all turned. Standing there was Bennett, holding another folder. I'd invited him quietly that morning. Mia's face drained of color. "Mr. Bennett?" Ethan said in shock. He nodded, his voice steady. "Every document, every transaction, every forged signature leads to one person. Your wife."
The air thickened with silence.
Ethan's eyes darkened as he looked at her. "Mia, please tell me he's lying." But she couldn't. Her lips trembled, eyes darting between us like a trapped animal. I leaned back slowly. "You could have taken anything, Mia. But you chose to take my son's trust. That's the one thing you can't buy back." Mia's mask shattered that night, and with it came her desperate confession. But justice, I soon learned, doesn't end at the dinner table. It begins in the courtroom. 2 weeks later, I found myself standing in front of the gray stone courthouse of Brookdale County. The morning sky was heavy with clouds, as if it too was holding its breath. I clutched my brown notebook close to my chest, the same one that had started this journey. Inside it were 8 months of notes, memories, and pain written in trembling ink. Amelia walked beside me, steady and calm. Her brown coat fluttered slightly in the wind. "You ready, Margaret?" she asked softly. I nodded. Ready or not, the truth doesn't wait. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with murmurs. The scent of paper, coffee, and tension filled the air. Across the room sat Mia, dressed in a black blazer, her hair pulled back tightly, face pale and expressionless. Ethan sat behind her alone. His eyes were red from sleepless nights. He hadn't spoken to me since the dinner, though I didn't blame him. Some truths are too heavy to accept all at once. When the judge entered, the room fell silent. The sound of the gavel striking echoed like thunder. "Court is now in session," the judge said, his tone firm. Case 2-4-FE089, Margaret Turner vs. Mia Turner, Elder Financial Exploitation and Identity Fraud. My heart thudded. But I stood tall. Amelia began the opening statement with the calm precision of a woman who knew her facts by heart. "For 8 consecutive months," she said clearly, the defendant used a fraudulent account under her mother-in-law's name to siphon funds meant for her care, totaling $32,000. These funds were then redirected to personal luxuries, including travel, jewelry, and a private vehicle purchase. Murmurs rippled through the room. Mia's lawyer, a nervous young man in a navy suit, stood abruptly. "Your Honor, my client maintains that Mrs. Turner, the plaintiff, is elderly and possibly misremembering details. There is no proof she didn't receive the money herself." My fingers tightened around the notebook. Amelia stepped forward, eyes sharp. "Then perhaps the court should review the plaintiff's records." She held up my brown notebook, the same one that had held my tears and suspicions. "Your Honor," she continued, "this notebook contains daily entries documenting every supposed payment and every visit from the defendant. Each date matches precisely with the bank's transaction timeline. And every page proves one thing: the plaintiff never received a single dollar." The judge took the book, flipped through the pages, and nodded slowly. "Detailed, consistent, compelling." Then Amelia turned to Bennett, who sat at the witness stand. "Mr. Bennett, you are the senior accountant at Turner & Co., correct?" "Yes, ma'am." "Do you confirm that the transfers were made by Mr. Ethan Turner to an account falsely registered as his mother's, but controlled by the defendant, Mrs. Mia Turner?" "I do," he said firmly. The courtroom went dead silent. Mia's face crumbled. She whispered something to her lawyer, but her words were lost under the hum of the ceiling fan. Then, finally, the judge spoke, after reviewing all documentation, testimonies, and evidence. "This court finds the defendant, Mrs. Mia Turner, guilty of elder financial exploitation and fraud. She is ordered to repay the full amount, including penalties, and forfeits all access to her husband's financial accounts for 5 years." The gavel struck once, twice, each sound like a heartbeat returning after a long pause. I didn't cheer. I didn't smile. I just exhaled, feeling years of weight slip off my shoulders. Across the room, Ethan's eyes met mine. There was pain there, but also understanding. Justice wasn't joy. It was peace, quiet, earned, and bittersweet. But justice, I soon learned, doesn't always mend what it breaks.
The case was over, yet silence filled my home again. Until one unexpected visitor appeared at my door. A week after the verdict, the house was quiet again. Too quiet. The ticking clock on the wall filled the silence, marking each passing second like a heartbeat. I sat by the window, watching the wind play with the curtains. The garden outside had begun to bloom again. Lavender, daisies, the stubborn roses that refused to die. It was strange how peace could feel so heavy. I had won, yes.
The court had spoken.
The lies were buried beneath the weight of truth. And yet, I missed my son. For days, I'd seen nothing of him. No calls, no messages. I knew he needed time to process everything. Betrayal never just bruises the victim. It shatters everyone who trusted the wrong person. That afternoon, as the sun dipped low, I heard footsteps on the porch. When I opened the door, Ethan stood there. He looked thinner, paler, but his eyes held something I hadn't seen in months: sincerity. "Mom," he said quietly, "can I come in?" I nodded, stepping aside. "Always." He walked in slowly, glancing around the familiar room. The photographs, the floral curtains, the faint scent of cinnamon that always lingered. For a while we said nothing. He just stood there, staring at the old wooden table where the envelope had once sat. Then he spoke. I didn't want to believe it. I thought there had to be some mistake. But seeing those papers, hearing her admit it, his voice cracked, and for the first time since he was a boy, I saw tears in his eyes. I reached out and held his hand. "You loved her, Ethan. That's nothing to be ashamed of. What matters is you saw the truth when it mattered." He nodded, his fingers tightening around mine. "I'm sorry, Mom. I should have listened sooner. You didn't deserve any of that." I smiled softly. We both learned something. Love shouldn't blind us to what's real. He exhaled deeply, the kind of breath that carries guilt, grief, and relief all at once. "I closed the joint accounts," he said. "And I asked Mr. Bennett to handle the rest. I don't want you worrying about money again. I'll make things right." I shook my head gently. "You already have my son. You came home." We sat together in silence for a while, watching the golden sunlight spill across the living room floor. Outside, a bird sang, a soft, uncertain melody that felt like hope returning. Before he left, he turned to me and smiled faintly. "You know," he said, "Dad always said you were stronger than anyone gave you credit for." I laughed quietly. "Your father was a smart man." After he drove away, I stayed by the window, the light fading into twilight. My brown notebook sat open on the table beside me. I picked up my pen one last time and wrote, "June 4th, the truth has been spoken. The lies are over. I have my peace, my son, and my dignity." That's more than enough. Then I closed the notebook, placed it beside Henry's photograph, and smiled. The wind carried the scent of the garden through the open window. Lavender and roses. Sweet and alive. For the first time in a long time, the house didn't feel empty. It felt quietly full, full of truth, of love rediscovered, and of a woman who had refused to be forgotten. Life has a way of testing the quiet ones. People mistake silence for weakness, patience for ignorance. But sometimes, it's the quiet ones who hold the deepest strength, because they know when to speak, and when to let the truth speak for itself. And that perhaps was my greatest victory of all.